Welcome everyone to an episode of the Old-Timers comic book show where the hosts aren't old, but the comics most certainly are. Joining me for this extravaganza of a show, it is the 30th Crusader.
Greetings.
Buenos dias, señor.
Buenos dias. ¿Cómo está?
Uh, Muy bien.
Very
Gracias.
good.
Hey.
Very good.
Dos cerveza, por favor.
Sorry. Too bad I already had them.
No! Why out there? If only I knew what the Spanish for 13 was, I'd be in better shape, maybe.
I can assure you there's many names for that.
I'm sure there are. I'm sure there are. And some
None
of
that
them
we
are.
can repeat on air.
Exactly. We have no professor today. The professor is taking Mrs. Professor out for, I think, a Christmas trip that was, offered. So they're out in sunny New York, enjoying the virtues of the Big Apple. I hope
Not,
Mrs. Professor is keeping the professor away from comic books.
we'll see what he buys when he comes back.
Yeah, yeah. Come back with the Madeline Pryor figure. Speaking of Madeline Pryor, this show, everyone knows we like to do randoms. We like the idea of just picking books. We don't always have to have a theme. That said, we suggested randoms, and yet somehow, by hook or by crook, we ended up with these bad guys. So we're here to talk about the X-Men. Now, part of this, there's a resurgence of X-Men interest. It could be the X-Men 97 cartoon that's been kicking around on Disney Plus for the last 6 weeks. It could be that in current times, the Krakoan age is coming to an end.
Yeah, I'm good with that.
Yeah, me too. So it seems fitting that we take a look at the X-Men. And whilst I talk about being fitting, did anyone see the news? We did a show. Our last show was a Valiant special. And then something like a week later, Valiant announced that they're bringing the universe back.
hmm
We're too cool for school, my friend. Too cool for school.
Yeah, it was valiant news.
Hey. What's about the X-Men then? What is it that we like so much about the X-Men?
I will start by saying probably the odds that they're up against. They're the
Okay.
underdogs. I think they're the biggest underdogs that Marvel started off with, really, right? Because
Mm-hmm.
their first titles, Fantastic Four, Avengers, and whatnot. Then you have this group, the X-Men, a year later, and they were young, they were not trained, they were raw,
Mm-hmm.
and they had their own personal struggles, and there was a lot of personality that came with that, even in the early days. And I
Mm-hmm.
think that's where the attraction stemmed from. Not to mention the adversaries that they were up against.
Mm-hmm.
I think in the early days, the adversaries, Magneto, I mean, goes without saying that he was probably the biggest one that they had. But
Definitely.
years later, even after the formation of the new X-Men, I think the villains just became so much more interesting and intriguing
Mm-hmm.
among all the extra drama, no pun intended, that was going around internally with the team.
Yeah, that's a really good point to make because I think for large parts, the villains in the X-Men aren't your stereotypical villain.
hmm
They have they're doing in the Lex Luthor mold, doing bad things for good reasons.
hmm
Magneto, a case in point.
Right.
Um, let's have a bit recap. So, the X-Men, created by Stan Lee, Jack Kirby, the massively the strangest superheroes of all for Marvel, is they're not created by radiation.
hmm
These are like characters that are born with powers. And when you think about it, when you think, well, what about the Avengers? There's not that many. If you think about the first iteration of the Avengers, there's not that many that are superpowered. You've
No.
got Thor maybe, but
Right.
everybody else is a creature of science, right?
Pretty much.
You know, pin particles and super serums and all that sort of stuff. The Iron
hmm
Man suit, for example, you know. So
Right.
it's interesting to see that these powers of the characters evolved. They were born with them. That they hit when puberty hit. They weren't irradiated. Um,
The
what I
contrast
find,
is amazing because, like you said, with the Avengers, right?
Mhm.
These are people that knew what to do. They just had to go and find innovative ways to do what they need to do. Where the X-Men were born with the gifts, but had no
Mm,
idea how to use them. So
yeah.
couldn't be more of a contrast.
Indeed. And also, I mean, people forget, but this book was cancelled. The X Men were cancelled in 1970,
Hmm.
and
Yep.
it became a reprint book. And it wasn't until Giant Size 1 and 94, which I think we'll have a look at in a little bit, that things started to take shape again.
Hmm.
Um, so I would love to have been the fly on the wall 13th of what made people think, you know what, let's do the X Men again.
Hmm.
When you think that the book failed spectacularly in the 70s, I don't, you know.
Yeah, it could be for a number of reasons. I mean, it was an early Marvel title,
Hmm.
and it did see some sort of success early in the beginning. Jack Kirby kicked things off. Stan Lee kicked things off with it.
I don't
But I
think
did
it's Kirby's best work, mind. I have to say
no,
that.
it isn't, and I'll admit that because I think that they outdid themselves in the beginning with Fantastic
Mm,
Four and Avengers,
agreed.
and that's where really the interest went, and
Mm,
people back then just gravitated to those. There
mm,
was an X-Men following back then, but it just wasn't as strong as the
mm.
Avengers and Fantastic Four love. And I've always said this, and I know the professor will agree with me. I think Fantastic Four, 1 through 100, maybe a little bit past that, is probably the best comics you read for early Marvel.
Agreed. I agree with that as well, actually. Um, I think,
You have Spider-Man kicking around too, so I mean that was an
yeah,
extremely popular title. So it's just hard to top that.
yeah, but I think the Fantastic Four. I think when you look at the sheer volume of great ideas that came out of that run,
Hmm.
you know, the Inhumans, the Watcher, Galactus, Silver Surfer, the Black
Right,
Panther. You know, it's
right.
like every time you picked up a Fantastic Four, it felt a book. It felt like you weren't just getting throwaway characters. You
Yeah,
know,
don't forget my pal Doctor Doom.
Doctor Doom. You know, the Wizard and all that sort of.
Hmm.
Whereas
Yeah.
Frightful Four.
Right.
Whereas the X Men had Mimic
The best thing that came out of the before the cancellation was Magneto for sure.
for sure.
Yeah,
For
Factor
sure.
3. I don't know who remembers that, but those were early villains of the X-Men, and I'm like, is that the best you get? Factor 3 with many members. Yeah, that's
Yeah, Factor 3 because we're worth it. Wait, that's something else entirely different.
yeah.
I will say this about the X Men book. The early stuff is Kirby by the numbers art wise, and I think that doesn't help because people tuned in expecting it to be Fantastic Four Avengers Kirby, and you got not even Daredevil Kirby. You know what I'm saying? So
Right.
it kind of, it, I'm not saying false promises at all, but you know, there's only so much stuff that you can do. Anyone can do. Um, and I don't think it was. I think it wasn't until Neil Adams came on the book, who could have revolutionized it, but I think he was just ahead of his time for Marvel, especially
Hmm.
when it comes to the X Men book, and that's where we're going to start our X Men kind of viewpoint. We're going to have a look at this book. This is X Men 56, which is the first Neil Adams book. It's from April '69. 69, dude. On eBay, check checking on your grade dependencies. You can get this anywhere from £50 to 179. Go collect, have this down as a grade 9, which is you know still a really crisp copy of a book. $222 on average, which I think is a decent price for this. But 9.6 jumps up to nearly $1,000.
Hmm.
It's script by Roy Thomas, who'll probably claim creative ownership of some of the characters in this book now,
Hmm.
after last time. And no prize. Neil Adams, as I mentioned, is on art. Tom Palmer's on inks. Colorist doesn't get a mention. Could be anyone. Potentially Glynis Wynn. She's around that time, and Herb Cooper is on letters. Right. 13th, I don't know how you feel about this, but I'm going to make a bold statement. I've said this before and I'll say it again. I think Adams' X Men is better than Adams' Batman.
Hmm. Oof. I understand what you're saying, I can agree to the point of the importance of this issue versus his Batman work for the sole reason that I think that this kind of revolutionized on the Marvel side the old
Mm.
tried and true Kirby formula. So the importance is certainly there. As far as the art on Batman, um, I like his art on Batman, and that's where I became a fan of Neil Adams.
I like his
Um,
work on Batman. I'm
yeah,
not dissing his work on Batman. I just
yeah,
think this is better.
yeah. Well, I think in certain panels it is. You know what I mean? And I just think it's just a matter of what characters you're working with, the
Mm.
familiarity. I think through time, with so many chances at Batman, I think that's where the art you could see it kind of growing in a way.
Hmm.
Whereas here, you're getting this is the first time. And with the X-Men, something that he didn't stay on for decades.
Mm.
You know what I mean?
I do. I have this is how I think about it. All right.
Mhm,
Neil Adams was on X Men. It gets
mhm,
cancelled. He's only on it for 10 issues, I think. If that, I
correct.
think it gets cancelled around 66, 68, something like that. And
Mhm,
back then it was a bi monthly book. Um, Yet, when we talk about Neil Adam clones or the fifth generation Neil Adams, invariably we talk about it because we've seen a Batman picture.
mhm.
So things like Irv Novak, or is that his name? Irv Novik, even maybe?
Novik, Novik, yep.
Novik, yeah. Jim Aparo, who
Mhm,
I think is better than Adams, but hey ho. Alan Davis.
mhm,
All of these are a kind of that next generation of Neil Adams, but we think of it from the Batman point of view. We don't think of it from, oh wow, Alan Davis just doing Neil Adams again on X Men. We
mhm.
just don't think about that. So,
Yeah.
I don't know. Um, so this is one of my choices. I think the art's super realistic. You can see the difference. I think in Adams' work here is just it just makes the book look so mature. You know, look at
Mhm.
that. Look at the Pharaoh going bonkers at the bottom page here.
Right.
You know, everyone's muscular. Everyone's mature, aged. Even I mean, poor Cyclops gets clumped around the head, bless his cotton socks. Um, but even the bit where Jean Grey starts using the telepathy is a
Mhm.
really great panel. The action shots work really well. It's dynamic. Um,
That's my favorite panel in this issue, by the way, that
well,
bottom right corner.
this one,
Yeah, I mean, that's an
yeah,
exceptionally drawn panel,
mm, definitely.
especially for Jean Grey. I mean, it shows the level of the book matured
Mm,
right away with the art, and so did the team, just based on
hmm.
the artwork here. They're not kids anymore.
No, exactly right. Um, this panel here, love this. How
Mhm,
she's using the telepathy and stuff. Um, it feels, and I know the professor, if he was here, he'd hopefully agree with me. But when we talk about books that feel their age,
mhm,
this doesn't to me. This book could have been just last week to me. It is that detailed. You know, I get everyone went from like Silvestri to Jim Lee and so on, and people in between. But this is, I think, up there with the Jim Lee X Men book, if not
mhm,
better, because it
mhm.
came first.
Yeah, I mean, I would have killed for Neil Adams to have continued on
Mm,
X-Men, but unfortunately, 66 was the last issue of the original X-Men before the reprint. But
mm,
Neil Adams on X-Men, I mean, look what it did here. This is only the start.
yeah,
Yeah, I wish
great
it could have
panel
continued
design
on.
there.
Yeah.
I would have loved to have seen Adams on X Men with Claremont.
Hmm. I
Not
agree
that
with
I'm
that.
saying, not that I'm saying that John Byrne was bad. John Byrne was absolutely tickly boo, but still. Um, Right now, I thought the writing was a little bit overblown. Roy Thomas is Roy Thomas.
Hmm.
We always talk about Chris Sticks when Claremont takes over and everyone has their own little, way of doing things. He probably picked it up from Thomas. I mean, to say this is a wordy book is to say, there's only one book we're going to talk about that's as wordy as this
Hmm.
later today. Um, but no, just the book works so well on every level. It just feels like science fiction, superhero drama. Look at that great panel there with the living monolith. Oh man, just so
Hmm.
great.
Hmm.
Um, no one explains that Cyclops has to, press a button on the side of his ears to, you know. I think
Hmm.
it's explained later. So no, this was a win-win for me. What were your thoughts?
The same, and I think it's a win all the way around for
Mm,
especially for the readers back then because the X-Men went it's a dramatic change. You go
mm,
from one issue to another and you're like, "Whoa, this is certainly different." The opening panel to this book, I think, is phenomenal as well because just their entrance alone, the angle of the team flying in together and just starting off
there you
the
go.
tale for this issue, it's phenomenal.
Mm,
The angels soaring, the team going in, and like you said, with some of the other pages that followed, I think Neil Adams in his first issue just knocked the ball out of the park with drawing Jean Grey here, and I, I thought it was phenomenal all the way around. I like the Living Monolith, to be honest.
mm,
I- Um, but this is his early days and whatnot. But I think it was a great issue all the way around. I also do like Havoc as well,
mm,
and you see this drama going on with Havoc and between him and the Living Pharaoh. So there's a lot of there was a lot of potential here, and I think the art just took over.
mm,
You know what I mean? So Roy Thomas, love him or hate him, he's written so many stories.
mm,
But I think that in this case, the art definitely overshadowed the script, and I think this opened up a lot of people to look towards the X-Men's way.
mm.
But I think by the time that happened, it was a little bit too late.
Maybe.
You know what I mean?
Yeah, definitely. It's frustrating because I mean, under Thomas and Adams, the Sentinels come back, and that's a
Right.
really good story. You
I
know,
love that story a big time.
oh
Yep.
man, some of my
Hmm.
favorites. And just so you know what we're talking about, this book that we're looking at also has the backup of from the original. Is this original style? Oh, it's an origins. So this is kind of like how it was supposed to have looked back in the day, and you can
Hmm.
see how dramatically different it was. So you kind of like, uh, it doesn't. It's not. That's of its time for sure,
Right.
but this is not. This is ahead of its time. And I think you're right, 13. I think there was just 13 minutes too late, I think, on this one
Yeah.
to uh,
It's
to stop the cancellation.
yeah, and it's great that we saw it, and
Mm,
it just I think it was a little too late. That panel that you talked about with Jean Grey, where she's trying to establish contact, um, it almost gave me that old Ditko feel to it, where it almost looks
yeah,
supernatural,
yeah,
and it was very dazzling and very like definitely gets your attention. I definitely liked what Neil Adams did here.
mm,
There's no question. You can look at every panel and try to dissect it. Even the background art,
mm,
which is something that I'm big on, is phenomenal. So even in the part where Havoc is trapped by the living Pharaoh, you can look in the background and there's all the machinery and it's busy. It's a busy panel, but it
mm,
doesn't take away from uh from what's happening,
mm.
despite all of the words, despite the script. And
Mm.
I think that's phenomenal.
Agreed. Absolutely agreed. Cool. Excellent. We're off to a excellent start.
Of course.
I promise no more. Well, we'll see. All right. Okay. So next up, before the break, we're going to have a look at one of your books. So this is where let me get it. It's X-Men 94. The kind of the first appearance of a new team, or is it? Is it not? Let me give you the dates before we get into that conversation. Where we at? 94. So this is August 75. On eBay, you can get this grade wise between 695 to 955 pounds. Go collect, and a nine will cost you $1,514 on average. And a 9.6, you are talking over $8,000. There you go.
Mhm.
Written by Chris Claremont, although Len Wen is on plotter duties. Art by Dave Cockrum. Ink by Bob McLeod. Um, Colors by Phil Rachelson and Tom Gachowski is on letters. I'm going to start this off and say I'm not a huge Dave Cockrum fan.
Yeah, I know.
Sorry.
I
So,
know.
why did you pick this book other than to wind me up?
Well, first and foremost, I'll start off by saying that my first foray into the X-Men was actually reading Giant Size #1, immediately followed by 94 and 95,
Mm-hmm.
courtesy of one of my cousins, Edgar, who unfortunately passed away a couple of weeks ago.
Oh,
And
sorry, man.
yeah, so am I, trust me.
I know I'm genuine. I didn't know. I did not know. Sorry.
Yeah, so he was the one that helped me get into comics. He bought me my first comic book, and as a kid, the X-Men was his thing,
Mm,
and he had issue 1 all the way through, late into the 130s straight. So I was, as a kid, this was he's like, "Hey, read this, and you may like this Giant Size 1," and I was just entranced.
mm-hmm,
And then I had to find out what happened next because, as we all know, at the end of Giant Size X-Men 1, what do you do with 13 X-Men? That was the question. That was the cliffhanger at the end of that issue. So now on to issue 94, 95, and I'm like, listen, man, just what else you have? I need to know. I need to know everything. And that opened up my world big time into the X-Men. So in reading X-Men 94 and 95 to get reacquainted with it, again, it just brought back a lot of those memories as a kid that where I was saying like, you know what? Why did he trust me as a kid to hold these books in my hands? But that's a question for another time, I guess. Reading X-Men 1, holding it in my hands was just phenomenal. But then this is where it started. And I think that's a credit to the Marvel team that, as we were just saying before, that issue 56, you know, it just the art was phenomenal, but it didn't salvage the X-Men totally.
mm,
It brought attention, but it was a little too late. They went into reprint. Giant Size comes out, gets a lot of attention, and now this is the first adventure of the new team
mm,
in their regular book in issue 94. So here we go again. The reprints are done.
mm-hmm,
Now you're getting new stories. You get to see the old team, but not for long.
mm,
And that's what the symbolism is of X-Men starting from this point. It was a whole new era, a whole new team, definitely a whole new direction.
mm-hmm,
And Dave Cockrum, at this point in time, he had been around a little bit, and I believe he was working in DC, if I'm not mistaken, and he had plans to use Nightcrawler, for example, in DC.
mm-hmm.
He had his own cast of characters that he wanted to bring into DC, and they're like, "Nah, we're good."
Was he
Well, here
working
you
on
are.
Was he not working on Legion of Superheroes at one point?
He was,
Yeah.
and just to get a little ahead of ourselves, the Imperial Guard is totally a Legion knockoff, but Nightcrawler was originally intended to be part of the DC universe,
And
and
same with Storm and Colossus.
that's correct. Correct. They were known as other characters, and
Mm,
Nightcrawler remained intact.
mm.
So how times have changed, right? Because you would think at this time it's like, yeah, he'll just be a new character, and then now look. Um, yeah, I don't have any qualms with his art. I like it for what it is at this
Oh,
time.
boy.
It's the job was really to just here's the story with Chris Claremont, and then here's the art with Dave Cockrum. I like it only for the classic feel of the
Mm,
of the book for this era.
okay.
Mm,
For m- for me, when I look at this, when I look at the art, bearing in mind this is 1975 and Neil
mhm,
Adams was 1969,
mhm,
right? I don't see the art evolved 6 years down the line.
mhm,
I think the art's regressed. I think Neil Adams' art is a million times better than this book. Unfortunately, um, what was I going to say? So, whilst we were talking, I remembered something. The reason why the X Men got a giant size #1 and then 94 is because the powers that be decided they wanted an international superhero team.
mhm,
And of course, when you look at the new X Men, you've got Proud Star or Thunderbird, Native American. You've got Colossus, a Rusky, Storms from Africa, Kurt Wagner is German, Banshee's Irish, Wolverine's Canadian. So they went for a kind of international. I suppose you could say it's the first affirmative action hiring.
Yeah, I look at it as more of
I was just going for the
people.
joke on that one. Thanks for not laughing.
Yeah,
Appreciate that. Yeah, cheers.
I look at it more from the standpoint of, well, if people are born with these gifts, they can't just all be born in one place.
That's a fair.
So
That's a
so
fair shout.
so now here you are where they're expanding on the
Mm,
X-Men world. And to be honest, I think that's one of the limitations from the
mm,
earlier run of the original X-Men, where their adventures were very grounded. You don't see them really going too far, too
mm,
crazy.
mm.
But with this new X-Men, that definitely just kicked the door wide open, where not just to show everyone like, hey, mutants can be anybody. The person even next to you can be a mutant,
Mm.
and they'll go wherever they're needed. And you'll see in later issues that included intergalactic adventures and things. So,
Yeah. I think if I find it ironic then that when we think about the fact it's supposed to be international, that the biggest two new members to the mutant family was Kitty Pryde down the line and Dazzler.
mhm,
What, what do I know? Can we all agree though that the Storm outfit in this book, the original Storm outfit, is still the best Storm outfit?
I agree.
Ah, okay, cool. That's good. So this is a pretty by the book, by numbers book, really. Um, Thunderbird's got a bit of an issue. He has nicknames for everyone. Won't listen to what people's names are. A bit of disrespect going on there. But there's a bad guy. The Animen turn up, and they threaten a huge sort of weapon of mass destruction, as it were. And the Avengers, via Beast, ask the X-Men to get involved and do something about it. The thing I liked about the book is the dysfunction between the team. I mean, we've seen dysfunction before in the Fantastic Four,
Hmm.
but this takes it to like the next level. And it's funny because I
An
in
extra
mo-
step.
yeah, if you will. I'm not. You didn't laugh at my affirmative action jokes. I'm not laughing at your X jokes. Sorry. Uh,
Fair enough.
yeah, fair enough. What was I going to say there? It makes me. If there's that much animosity between Scott Summers and Wolverine, I wonder why Wolverine sticks around. You know what I mean? Because I understand that everyone thinks, oh, it's because he sticks around for Jean Grey, but in issue 94, she bugs out.
Well, the answer you'll find on page 2 of issue 94, where he says, "Sure, I'll join the team because it's sitting around Alpha Base waiting for a call."
That's how he felt then. But the
Right.
animosity between Cyclops and Wolverine,
Oh yeah, it definitely escalated without a
yeah.
doubt.
And then you think to yourself, well, if you hate it that much, why don't you go and do one? But he doesn't. He just sticks with it for some reason.
I think
Um,
looking at it from the Wolverine perspective, right, where he was introduced as the guy that went out and, hey, go get the Hulk,
yeah,
to now you're a member of the X-Men, to, hey, are those claws for real,
yeah.
to, wait, you're a mutant? Okay. So a lot of things have happened for Wolverine, but I think aside from being bored and departing from his Canadian past to join the X-Men, he grew with the team despite
Mm,
all the strife that he had with Scott and everyone else. I
mm,
think he felt guilted because of the mission of the team. The professor grounded Wolverine.
yeah,
Remember, their mission was not just to stop, um, atrocities from happening, but also to help other mutants, good or
yeah,
bad.
yes. School of Gifted youngsters and all that. Cool.
Correct. And I think Wolverine felt committed to see that dream of the professors.
Mm. Um, I like how in later years they have a bit of a mutual respect for each other, and
Right.
Wolverine calls Scott Slim, which is a nickname they had for a while,
Hmm.
which I quite like. So we're going to go for a break before we go into the next book that we're going to look at. The cliffhanger here is that the ship's been destroyed and everyone's fallen to the death. What's going to happen next, do you think? We'll find
Hmm.
out. We'll find out in about 30 seconds' time. As we talk about Marvel books, it's fair shout. He's the No Prize Podcast. There you have it. For Make My Marvel, check out the No Prize Podcast. They'll keep you up to date with the local, the more up to date shenanigans of the X team, be it the fall of the House of X or, as we mentioned before, X-Men 97. All right, next up is the sequel to 94. This is, funnily enough, 95. It came out in October 75. Yes, I know. Back then, the X-Men was a bi-monthly book. It wasn't that popular, once every 2 months. To be fair, there was a range of Marvel books that came out bi-monthly. Do you know why that reason was, predominantly, 13?
They weren't doing too well.
There is that. But the other issue is that the distributor that Marvel used in the 70s
Hmm.
was owned by DC Comics. So they had it in the negotiation that Marvel could only put out something like 8 books a month or whatever. So that meant that certain books, like Amazing Spider-Man, you're going to get every month. But other books like X-Men, Doctor Strange, and that sort of stuff, you're going to get once every other month to fit within that eight book quota.
Hmm.
Bonkers, isn't it? Yeah.
Yeah. In very
Imagine,
strange times.
yeah,
No pun intended.
yeah. Imagine it. The Mets coming up. The Yankees say to the Mets, "Yeah, you can play here, but you've got to forfeit some of your. Well, it's the Mets and the Yankees, so that probably happens already. All right, all
Yeah, you
right.
can
Here we
only play
go.
20 games at home.
Yeah, that's it. Yeah. Or the Jets and the Giants, you can only play no games at home. All right, so this is
Mm.
X-Men 95. Yes, I've said about the bi-monthly thing. You can get this for around £125 to 195 on eBay. I have lost my number for Go Collect, so apologies for that. I will get that as we go through. Right, written again by Chris Claremont. Plot is Len Wen. Cockrum again's on art. This time Sam Granger's on inks. Karen Mantlo is on colours, and Petra Goldberg is on letters. As it says, quite right at the top, someone dies, and it's not Jean Grey. Oh my God! I didn't know anybody else in the X-Men died ever. 13th, what's going on?
Well, just a quick recap of 94, right? Very
Please
quickly.
go for it.
One of the things that kicks it off with Chris Claremont right off the bat is he's introducing a villain that people have seen before in the pages of Avengers with Count Nefaria. Now he's got a group of Ani-Men out there, so clearly he's got his henchmen, if you will. He takes control over a military facility that can control the intercontinental ballistic missiles, and he threatens to, or basically tries to tell the world, like, you need to pay me, otherwise you're dead. It's kind of like a plot from Doctor Evil, in
One
Austin
billion
Powers.
dollars.
We're holding the world
Ah.
for exactly. So, like you said, Johnny, the Beast, he's part of the Avengers, and that's kind of their communication to the X-Men, if you will.
Mhm.
Like, hey, go handle this. So right away, Chris Claremont establishes that, hey, listen, the Avengers are not going to be able to handle everything. Neither can the Fantastic Four. In come the new X-Men. So 94 not only introduces the strife among the team, who's going to stay, their things are already kind of off on the wrong foot, but the new members are established, and off you go. So now issue 95 picks up where 94 left off for the first, or the second part of the first adventure of the new X-Men together. In fact, the only original X-Men here that's part of the field team is Cyclops. So here they are battling Count Nefaria, trying to infiltrate his base. But in this issue, they will battle the Ani-Men in an attempt to stop Nefaria from carrying out his plans. What I liked about this book is I think in this second issue, It was stronger than the first issue of 94 as far as the story is concerned, because now you're starting to see the team gelling a little bit more. I'm not going to say a lot, just a touch,
Mm.
only because they have no choice, because if they don't, they're dead. So Count Nefaria right away proves to be a little bit more formidable here in his Animen, which I like. That they're different, they're weird characters, but
Mhm.
are the X-Men themselves not weird at this time?
They
So you
are.
don't know who, no one knows whose powers do what. Storm is kind of like self-explanatory, but we don't know the full extent of Colossus's strength. We don't know the full extent of what Thunderbird can do. We don't know what Wolverine can do, really. He says he has claws and he wants to kill somebody, but we won't see that he was really serious until later on, that he would kill somebody. He didn't care, but we
Mm.
don't know that yet. So you kind of have to put yourself in the shoes of the readers back then, where you're seeing this for the first time. And what I loved about it is, I love when hero teams go against villain teams.
Mm.
And this here, the battle scenes, I really like the art here. Um, just showing them going one on one with these guys, but yet fighting as a team. Um, I think it was kind of messed up in a way where Banshee and Thunderbird are out of the battle right away, and it's like just let them rest there. We got to keep moving on. Good job,
Uh,
Cyclops. So
it's the Smallville school of don't show your powers.
yeah, like Cyclops, he's my favorite X-Men,
He's my
but
favorite too, to be honest.
in this issue, it's like the mission comes first. It doesn't matter, and then we'll see that that thing that he has, for that passion for his mission, get thrown up on its face sideways, or whatever you want to call it,
Mm.
years down. But like here, right off the bat, it's like, yeah, we gotta go. So
Yes.
this gave you that anxiety, if you will, for this issue, that sense of
Mm.
urgency, that this mission was important because it was.
Mm.
And but then the shocker here is Thunderbird makes the ultimate sacrifice in going after Count Nefaria, and it was already mentioned in training with the X-Men in the danger room, and I'll touch on that in a second, that he may have made a careless mistake even when training.
Mm.
Cyclops saw that right away and called it out, but Cyclops said it was a failure upon himself for not leading him better,
Well, to be
at least
fair,
in these two issues.
see, I disagree on this one because Cyclops clearly says that 94, Thunderbird, you're injured, you're staying here. And it's
Hmm.
Xavier that sends him. Xavier says, no, you'll take him. And you're like,
Yeah, no, I'm not blaming Cyclops for Thunderbird's death. I'm just pointing out that in issue 94, while they were training,
mm.
Cyclops felt he was too hard on himself. So yes, I agree with you that, the professor's like, no, you're good, you go. Because
I
the
think,
mission was too important and he felt like you just need all hands on deck for this
I
emergency.
think, I hear what you're saying, but I think Thunderbird's powers aren't too dissimilar from Colossus,
Yeah, I
to be
mean, we would
honest.
never know. We didn't really get a chance to
Um,
know that. To answer the first thing that you said earlier with, an X-Men dies, have we not seen that before? Well, remember that the readers early on in the X-Men were kind of duped into thinking that Professor X was dead for a time,
yeah,
but
that's
then they brought him back. So, here we are where this happens to Thunderbird, who I happen to like. I'm like, oh yeah, this guy is cool, and then boom, gone, and
the
that was
13th
it.
kiss of death.
Yeah, and we
I
never,
love I love me the Giants. Boof, gone.
yeah, we don't really see him again until his brother picks up his mantle and things like that as a
Yeah.
Warpath. But I think that this established right away that this was kind of like a book that was just going to do things very, very differently.
Mm,
And I think that's what was firmly established with these issues. And I'm going to include Giant Size 1 with this 94 and 95. This is not the X-Men of yesteryear.
no.
This is a new team, a new direction, and there can be deaths. And this will not be the first time. It's Phoenix aside. This is
Mhm,
not the first time that you will see mutants dying, right? We had
mm.
Mutant Massacre and things like that many years down the road. Others have died. So this just started that feeling of, you just don't know. Like,
Mm.
Like who's going to make it the next issue or who's not going to make it. And I think it's a very powerful message if you think about it. So this put the X-Men on the map. Their first adventure was a very memorable one that would definitely stay with the team. Like I can't believe one of us is not coming home,
Mm.
and it started a lot of that. And in a way, in a sad way, I think this bonded the living members even more together.
See, I hear what you're saying. I agree with you to an extent, but and this I, we can agree that this isn't the finished article. This isn't the finished product
No.
because, as you mentioned, a couple of the characters get knocked out and they stay knocked out for the entirety till it's time for one of them to die. It's hard in team books to show um, each character getting their time in the light. Yeah,
Hmm.
and even the fight scenes in this, it still isn't fantastically well. Yeah, it looks great, it's dynamic and all, but in the Avengers there seems to be a cohesion. Yeah, so in this they haven't got this yet, and Claremont hasn't got it down yet either, because pretty much Colossus pretty much does nothing the entire book at all, and Wolverine barely does anything. You know, the people that get the actions, Nightcrawler for bamfing all over the place, some Storm Love,
That could
Thunder,
be a Cockrum influence right off the bat.
yeah. So exactly. Um, I do like how Claremont thinks logically. So in this example here, we've got here how the mesmerize Cyclops, which forces his eyes open, which activates his visor, so the blast comes out and gets the character. And yes, it doesn't activate the visor; it drops the ruby quartz. Yeah, I know my stuff. Thank you. Um, I also think it highlights something that becomes apparent later on in the run, and that it's the distrust between Scott and the professor.
Hmm.
Because I think eventually the professor bugs out and hangs out in space with Lalandra. Um, and then Scott's left to his own devices. And I think that's when Scott becomes the better leader, when he's not having to put up with Xavier banging on his case all the time. Um, I still think the Neil Adams art's better than this, but
I think that's what makes this whole X-Men era right here so important because there's so many things to talk about that we don't have the
mm,
time for
mm,
in in an hour to do it justice. Where every person I talk to that's read these books has a different angle on it. But I think all agree that, you know, for a team, this was not your normal team.
mm,
Because and in years to come, you would know this as well, that they would have different members, they would have
mm,
different rotations, they would have a different field leader, if you will. The internal struggles just got to a point where it's like, my goodness, like how much more can this one character endure? Or
mm,
poof, here you're gone. Just like Thunderbird was here, we didn't get a chance to know him yet. And to
mm.
your point, I do agree what you said, where Claremont, this is the new car he's driving. He doesn't have all the features yet. You know they're there. You know the features are there. You just don't know how to use them yet. But I think he would master that later on. And I think the one thing that
Agreed.
we forgot to mention with issue 94, that started the 16 something year run of Claremont with
Mm.
issue 94. So yeah, this is literally the brand new car, brand new team, brand new car, first story, and right out the gates, one member's gone. And I think that and it that and it right there, it served as a function to tell readers like, listen, tune in next time because anything can happen, anything goes. And I think that's what brought a lot of attention to X-Men. Not to mention that Marvel right away went above and beyond to try to get Wolverine in the forefront. So this is where it kind of started in these early new
Mm.
X-Men adventures.
It makes me laugh when you say things like it's a new car without the features, and right out of the bat, he's gone and dinged it. Like killing
Yeah,
one of the
well,
characters.
it's a reality, unfortunately. And to talk about early X-Men adventures, right? 1 through
Hmm.
66. The professor was like, look, these are young kids. And he warned them, you have to train, you have to learn. But these missions that I'm sending you on, they're very important, but they're very dangerous.
Mm.
And then, in most cases, they come back home mostly unscathed. This shows you now that they are not the Avengers, they're not the
Yeah,
Fantastic Four, but they'll get the job done, but at what cost? Whether
yeah,
that be somebody dying or somebody's feels a type of way like Cyclops would on a lot of these missions.
yeah.
And I think that was very important for this book going forward.
Agreed. Agreed. You can see the little bits of tricks and traits that are going to be in the X-Men for years to
Right.
come in this book. So that's
And
always
that's a credit to Claremont, because
agreed.
team books are not easy, and you can even see like early on they had some sort of personality going on.
Mm,
I think he carried Cyclops beautifully, but these other characters, they were brand new. This is the third appearance, fourth appearance of Wolverine,
yeah,
third appearance for Storm and Colossus, Nightcrawler, and nobody knows these
yeah,
people.
yeah.
So,
Blank slate time. Cool.
mhm,
Excellent. So as time went by, people left the X-Men, as you mentioned. We just looked at 95, where the original Bar Cyclops decided to do one. We've already talked about the champions, where a couple of them ended up. Defenders also we've talked about. I think
mhm,
a couple of them make them all the way over there. But it wasn't until Jean Grey got fished out of the Hudson that we had X Factor #1. There you go. This is X Factor #1, February '86. You can get this for as little as £7 on eBay. A grade 9 on Go Collect, it normally goes for around $34. I personally think that $34 is a little bit high to pay for this book, as much as I
mhm.
love X Factor. But
Agreed.
it's written by Bob Layton and Jackson Geiss. Say Geiss or Guice?
Yeah,
Geiss,
guys.
Jackson Geiss is on art. Inks are all over the place. So you've got Joseph Rubinstein, Jackson Geiss, and Bob Layton. Colors again all over the place. You've got Petra Scuzzi, Max Shield, and Glynis Oliver on colours. The letterer doesn't get a credit, which I think is a travesty of justice, because this book has more words than 3 dictionaries put together. It is, it's a hard read. But essentially, the way it works is that, yeah, Jean Grey's back, and we find out that the other X-Men don't know about her being back yet. She appears in Avengers and the Fantastic Four books. Um, and then when she comes back, they all start to hang out together. Scott comes in, effectively leaving his wife, Madeline, and his newborn son. What a guy. To form X Factor. And the X Factor is kind of like, it's like the Green Hornet style. So back when we did the Green Hornet a few shows ago, we
Mhm.
talked about the Green Hornet was a criminal. He posed as a criminal in an effort to catch the bad guys.
Right.
So X Factor is exactly the same. The pose as initially the pose as mutant hunters, but in fact what they're doing is capturing them and scooting them away down a mutant railroad, as it were, to get them away from authorities and protect them. All right.
Right.
It's not until the Brotherhood of Mutants come into it as Freedom Force that things go a little bit awry, but that's down the line. That's down the line. For those of you who have read the Untold Marvel story, the book that Bud Knight bang on about a lot, there's a whole half a chapter about the problems that this book had. How allegedly Jim Shooter had the book and then he wanted it rewritten, and he wanted it redone, and then there's this, then there's that. So does that explain the sheer volume of words? I have no idea. But some of the panels look really good. Angel looks pretty cool there. Um, words. Candy Southern, Angel's girlfriend or partner, is happy to be left alone with builders for some reason. Ah, maybe maybe they're erection artists. I don't know. See what I did there.
Yeah, I did.
Yeah. And then we get our first neophyte mutant here who can't control the powers. Funny because I read this and it's like she's called Emma. I was like, is that supposed to be Emma Frost, the White Queen? I don't understand what's going on here. But then, lo and behold, the Fantastic Four get involved, introduce Angel to Jean Grey, and from there on in, and Scott comes in, and all the usual things that then happen. Get a recap of the Fantastic Four book and the Avengers book. Again, how wordy does it need to be if you've read the books already? Um, they do a lot of just standing around and talking until they get the first mission, and then they're kind of like, let's go. It's I love X. I love the book. I love the title. I maybe don't like issue one. I'll say that. That's a bit harsh actually. It's a hard read. It's a long read, but I love X Factor. I love the idea, and I love the things that they ended up with. I stuck with X Factor all the way up until X-Men 1, where they combined the teams again, and they had the
Hmm.
Sentinel ship. Loved all of that. I thought it was brilliant. I really did enjoy it. This book is probably not the best example of that at all in any shape, way, or form. So, for completists, go for it. Some of the art works really well. Some of the art doesn't work so well. Again, I still think the Neil Adams stuff looks better than this stuff. But am I wrong?
Well, I won't argue with you on that on the artistic level.
Yeah. So
This is many years later, though.
yeah, yeah, indeed. Um, but no, you've got the angsty stuff here where they're all like trying to survive, and Scott realizes that he's there for a reason to save them, and yada yada. He's got a Rob Liefeld chess going on there. Um, before Rob Liefeld even existed. Um, so yeah, this book is probably more angsty than the original X book, to be honest. Because down the line, you've got Apocalypse, you've got Archangel coming up. Walt Simonson comes on the book, and at which point, when Walt Simonson gets on the book, it turns into an absolute peach of a book
Hmm. I agree
for
with that.
me. For
Yep.
me,
Yeah.
but like Claremont in 94, 95, we've got to start somewhere. So that's why I picked
Hmm.
this. And also, it also ties into the X Men 97 cartoon with the whole Madeline Pryor stuff. So there you go. Check it out. 13th, what was your thoughts?
Yeah, it's what you mentioned earlier about referencing another book. I'll throw another one out here for those completists. I,
Mm-hmm.
I I recently read this too a couple of weeks ago, ironically. The Untold Saga of the Phoenix,
All right,
where
right.
this is more of the what would have happened if Jean Grey had survived. In original Jean Grey survived and didn't die. So it's kind of a what if tale, but I think what's more interesting is not just how things would have happened if they had decided to not kill off Jean Grey
Okay.
at that time, but I think the interview that was held with the creative cast, the creators at the end of that book of the whole Dark Phoenix saga. So I think that's very interesting because at that time they killed off an original X-Men that was
Mm,
huge for Jean Grey. Now fast forward to X Factor now, right? So as Johnny mentioned, she was recovered in from the Hudson River by the Avengers, and now Reed Richards is working with her. And yeah, this is her. She's back. So that whole conversation of and the debate of should we kill her off, shouldn't we kill her off? I think that the Untold Saga of the Phoenix is a great book to read. Plus, obviously, the original material that was put in canon. But
mm,
then you pick up here. She's back. The original Jean Grey is back, but you get your answers here. And how did they do this? But then most importantly, you're gathering the original X-Men together again,
mm,
the original group, and they're not kids anymore. They're not young adults. These guys, they're veterans now.
mm,
You mentioned the Beast, the Angel, and Iceman. Champions or defenders or Avengers in the Beast case. They're
mm,
like, yeah, I'm down, and I believe in. with this book, like you said, Johnny, what they were doing was saying like, yeah, we're X Factor, but don't forget we're exterminators too. Hire us.
Mm.
We'll solve your
You have a
mutant
mutant.
problem.
You have a mutant problem. We'll get rid of it.
Correct. They were like mutant pest control. But in this issue, again, as true with any of the X-Men books in the 80s, the drama.
90s.
It's like it's the soap opera level is like level 13 for soap opera.
Agreed.
And you have to go through this big speed bump as a reader. And once you're over that speed bump, then things start kicking off for X Factor. So I always say issue one is a very, very, very important to establish to the readers what are you doing. And the cover does
Mm.
most of the work for you. And I thought it was brilliant because the X-Men debuted a couple of decades before this book came out. Look at all the things that happened through 1985 with the X-Men, but you know what? Let's bring the original team back. So this was great for the readers that were there when
Mm.
the original X-Men dropped. This is great for the readers that were invested into X-Men because remember they were the biggest selling book in the 80s, one of them.
Mm-hmm.
And now then he did a second title with New Mutants, but here you go. You know what? There's room for more. But if we're going to do it, we're going to do it with the original team. And I was like, you know what? So what if I'm spending a little bit more? I want this book
Mm.
because it's the original team. They're more developed as characters, and I can't wait to see what they do next. Except nothing happens in this book other than Jean's back.
Well, you
So
get the modus operandi with the mutant that you never.
correct.
Is the mutant? Does it turn out that he's going to be Pyro, or is that already been? Uh, or is
Oh,
Pyro
Rusty
has been?
Collins.
Yeah, has he been established elsewhere by this point or prior to
I
it?
forget what the hell happened. He's not Pyro.
Oh, there you go.
But I think the biggest challenge with this book, aside from all those things that I mentioned, was how are you going to sell to the readers that Jean Grey made it?
See, I the hardest sell for me is would Scott Summers dump his wife and child to hang out with his
Mhm.
ex?
I think you got your answer right away.
The answer is
He's like,
yes.
no, I gotta go. I gotta
Yeah.
go. Yeah, but Madeline Pryor, and this causes a complication because people were pissed pretty much that Jean Grey got killed off. So what do you do? Here's a clone, Madeline Pryor. Nobody knew what was going on, but she looked just like Jean Grey. Coincidence? Whatever. Well, guess what? Jean's back now. Now Madeline's on like, uh-oh. So now you start that soap opera just with Cyclops, Madeline, and Jean. Not to mention the rest of the other members, because remember, she died.
Yeah.
So here
So,
she is.
Jean Grey died. So she died, comics wise,
Hmm.
loads of times, in fact. But um,
I look
it was
at
the
this
one.
era
It
as
was
as
one
her and
thirty seven,
hibernate.
wasn't it? 137. So X Men
Hmm.
137. She
Correct. The
X
double
Men.
size issue. Yep.
Yeah, 137. When did that come out? Let's have a quick look. X Men 137 came out in 80,
Hmm.
June 80. Right. So this book came out in, what did I say it was? Where's my
85.
notes? 85, 86. So
Hmm.
it took 6 years.
Right.
I don't
Yeah.
know, man. But then she
It's
died
it's
every other
so
year thereafter. It's crazy.
it's such a tough thing because we've talked about this as well, where Marvel Girl was a huge character, right? Like like the old school Marvel, and then you
Hmm.
just kill her off in 1980, at almost where everybody knew like what the X-Men were up to. These were must-read books, and then boom, she's out.
Mm.
Now you go through this time and then you're like, man, did we make a mistake? Or if we're going to bring her back, how do we do it? So all these questions lingered. And Marvel, this is what they did. They brought her back into continuity, and the rest is history. But on the DC side, you look at Crisis and you look at Barry Allen, he was gone, like gone for a long time.
Jason Todd.
And Jason Todd as well. So like we're talking decades. With Jean
Mm.
Grey, she's back a few years later, and did it make the books better? I would think so.
It's interesting because if we wanted, we could do a whole hour on Jean Grey, but it's
Absolutely.
interesting how she gets um, wooed
Hmm.
by the Hellfire Club.
Right.
And then Madeline Pryor, she gets wooed by the demons to turn into the Goblin Queen. You
Hmm.
know, what is it about redheads and bondage suits? I have no idea, but still, you know, it works, and it's kind of that same, I suppose, mentality across. I think that well, as much as I love that early era of X-Men,
Hmm.
um, I also thoroughly love the 80s version up to about 80. When did X-Men 1, Jim Lee, come out? 90, so that's 90 something.
91.
Yeah, so,
90, 91.
so that was it. I'm probably, 82 onwards, or this onwards. For me, I love the interconnectivity of it all.
Hmm.
So I don't know. I'm just a little bit old school, I think.
There's so many angles, again, like I said earlier, that you can look at these and dissect them.
Mm,
And I again, I've met many readers of the X-Men in my time, and each one will give you a different reaction. Where one will be like, "No, you know what? I'm glad she died as the Phoenix, but they should have kept her dead," or "No, keep her alive," or how they brought her back, they may not agree with, but she's there.
mm,
There's so many things, and that's just on one character. But X
mm,
Factor kicked it off with the original members back, with all the baggage that came with them to this point. They're
mm,
here, and they're going to incorporate more baggage because they're the exterminators as well. So, what are you going to get with that when you start messing around with things like that? I get the cause. This is different. This is a different
mm,
level of Xavier's mission, and who best to do it than the X Factor? I love the book
mm.
for many issues. I agree with you all the way through until the 90s, but you got to start somewhere. I agree with you too on the
Great.
Simons stuff.
Yeah. Well, you're a Simonson fan, so
Yep.
I
Oh yeah,
understand.
without doubt.
So obviously we've missed the professor to disagree with us on this. So we've agreed a lot on this. So Professor, come back soon. I don't like agreeing with this guy that much.
Listen, let me take my glasses off and then you can see what happens.
Oh yeah, whatever. Right, that's it for another show. Thank you, 13, for hanging out. I appreciate that.
Of course, I had an exceptional time.
Hey, don't forget to check out the UCPM for all your favorite shows, including
The Definitive Crusade. You can catch all the
yeah,
latest DC reviews there.
cool. And if you like everything Marvel, you saw the trailer for it earlier, no prize. If you want to speak to or listen to interviews with comic creators, check out Outside the Panels. It's all there. What more could you want? Excellent. Thanks again, 13th. See you in a
Of,
fortnight.
of course, Excelsior.
Excelsior. I'm exasperated.
I
I've been
bet.
your host, Machine Hughes. As always, adios.